A review copy of Ghost Giant was provided by publisher Thunderful and developer Zoink. Ghost Giant puts the player in the role of a giant ghost who's tasked with assisting a young boy named Louis. Louis is terribly frightened at first, but he eventually warms up to the ghost and the two become good friends. After Louis finds that his stock of sunflower seeds have been eaten by rats, he must travel to the city to get new seeds, and he ends up having a few misadventures along the way. Without getting into spoilers, that's pretty much the gist of the story. Something this cutesy and simple would normally get on my nerves, but Ghost Giant handles itself fairly well. The art direction deserves special recognition. It's similar to games like Paper Mario or Yoshi's Crafted World in that everything is built with virtual cardboard. Pieces of duct tape and giant staples hold the stages together. And when a player needs to look inside of a building, then the whole thing can be grabbed and spun around. The game does a good job at displaying what is essentially a collection of virtual dioramas. And the characters kind of look like little wooden toys as well, which helps them fit in with the game style. Even if it's not necessarily impressive from a graphical standpoint, it does look very nice, and it's one of the higher points that I can give this game. The gameplay is not too unlike a traditional point-and-click adventure, albeit very simple and level-based rather than exploring a larger world. In other words, every item that you find is designed to be used in that particular area. Most of the game revolves around looking for items, some of which are pretty well hidden in plain sight, and once you've got the item in hand, it's pretty obvious what you're supposed to do with it. If that wasn't enough, the characters will often speak out loud as a form of not-so-subtle hints. It's not so bad, and some of the solutions are pretty clever. However, a good chunk of the game is essentially playing I Spy. Then there are times when the player will need to throw things, and this is the worst. It's mostly due to the cheapness of the PlayStation VR system, but the point is that you can't make throwing items very effective when you only have one front-facing camera to work with. The story is the main focus here, and thankfully it does have decent pacing. The player is often seeing new environments and eccentric characters.
Excuse me. Excuse me. I need to cross the bridge.
Are you sure you want to do that? Or did society put that idea in your head?
We're blocking this bridge as a statement.
Why?
Because there's no true art in this town.
So you won't let me through because you want more art?
The little guy gets it.
Good for you, little guy.
Hey, Jules.
Yes, Odile?
I can't remember. Am I in love with you this week?
I think you're in love with Jim.
I think you're in love with neither
me?
of us.
Either way, we're all miserable.
Certainly.
Unfortunately, there are a few moments where the dialogue falls apart. Characters will sometimes speak without any breaks between their lines.
Some scurvy scallywag has taken off with its innards, and I can't leave me post. Yar!
I'll look for the missing parts.
Aye, what's your name, laddie?
Louis.
Lewis? It's mighty kind of ye to help an old sea dog in need. Ahoy, Captain Pelicard! I got some unexpected...
Or they'll constantly get interrupted and feel the need to go back to their previous sentence.
Everyone's so busy these days, they don't pay attention.
It's pretty dark. It's so dark.
Everyone's so busy these days, they don't pay attention and see the beauty in the things that... What a beauty! Everyone's so busy these days, they don't pay attention and see the beauty in the things they throw away. Oh my, I haven't seen that piece of dirt in 15 years. It takes me back. Everyone's so busy.
It comes off as pretty bad. Not terrible, but it is one of the things that breaks the game's immersion. When it does work, the characters and dialogue is just fine. And while most of the story is rather low stakes, it does manage to stay interesting and occasionally funny. Then there's a couple of moments where the story gets really dark, especially right before the ending. I believe that if people give this game a chance, then they'd easily find themselves invested in what's going on. I was totally on board with the plot, right up until the ending. Again, I'm not gonna bring up spoilers, so a lot of this is going to be beating around the bush. The game has a couple of clear chapter breaks where a new focus and direction are introduced, and this helps keep the story moving. While the second chapter does end, and it does so very well, there is no third chapter. Instead, the game does a time skip and it shows all the characters being happy, and then the end. That's it. There's no real explanation either. I wish that was a joke, but no. The game literally says months later and then jumps to the epilogue. It really feels like there's a huge chunk of the plot missing. It's so bad for the story to hit rock bottom and then immediately throw an undeserved happily ever after ending. Now, to be fair, I think I get the reasoning and the lore behind it. There are little hints that would explain why the developers would use that time skip to bypass so much of the story. However, that doesn't excuse the sudden break in pacing or how lazy the writing is. I don't know if the writer had written herself into a corner and couldn't figure out how to properly wrap up the story, or if the development team was too ambitious and they couldn't properly finish the game. The latter might actually be the case when you consider that the game's announcement trailer clearly has some cut or altered content. But regardless of whatever the reasoning might be, there is no excuse. The ending is really bad and unsatisfying. Unless you play it for yourself, you have no idea how drastic of a turn of events this is. And since this has a focus on storytelling, it really hurts the game as a whole. With all that said, Ghost Giant is not a bad game at all, but it's not good enough to appeal very strongly to any particular demographic, either those looking for gameplay or for a story. The puzzles are alright, but they're also very simple and not much of a challenge. The story slowly builds itself well and it manages to be engaging, but then it falls apart when it matters most. The presentation is great for the most part, but that's not enough to cover up the other flaws. And on top of everything, it's really short. It shouldn't take the player more than 3 to 4 hours at most to complete the game, and double that amount of time if they want to go for the Platinum Trophy without using a guide. This is clearly a kids game, so maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but I don't like using that as an excuse. A kids game can still be well made, and this one just misses the mark. In regards to the overall value, I can't really recommend this game. There are a ton of other story-based point-and-click adventure games that are much better. However, if you do have an interest in it, and you have an understanding of what you're getting into, maybe you want a virtual reality game for your kids, then it's not such a bad game to get. Although I will say that $30 is definitely pushing it for this game, since you can pretty easily 100% it in under 10 hours. But again, it's not so bad.
Help! No!
Thanks for watching my review on Ghost Giant.
Stop fishing, and then you fall asleep, and this is just a dream.